Welcome to The Critique. The material we have today is a transcript focused on the death of cartoonist Scott Adams, and it argues pretty passionately against the media calling him disgraced.
And it contrasts that with how they treat other, let's say, much more controversial figures.
Exactly. So let's dive right in. The first thing that really stands out is this theme of, righteous outrage over media bias.
It's the core of the whole piece.
It is. It's specifically calling out places like People magazine and the New York Times, and it sets up this really powerful case for hypocrisy.
Yeah, showing how Adams' comments basically got his career canceled, while, these other figures get these surprisingly soft obituaries.
The framework is so effective. It's a polemic, really. It's designed to get a strong reaction from the audience about what the hosts are calling the worst of the worst in media.
It is, but I have a question about that. I wonder if the material really considers the, let's call it the physics of argumentative momentum.
Argumentative momentum. I like that. So you're building velocity towards a point.
Exactly. And the highly persuasive core argument here, which relies completely on building up that emotional picture of media hypocrisy, is just significantly undermined by a huge disruption in the pacing.
Okay, I think I know what you're getting at.
The audience is primed, right? They're waiting for the reveal of the headline from People magazine. You've built it all up.
And right at that moment.
Right at that peak, the flow is just shattered by this long, and I mean remarkably granular ad read.
Cowboy colostrum segment. Yeah, it lands at the precise moment the critique is about to pivot into the detailed analysis of that disgraced Dilbert.
Exactly. And that's the weakness here. It's that the conversation dives deep into the product specifics. It's not just a quick mention.
No, it's a whole discussion. The three flavors, vanilla, chocolate, matcha, the mixing techniques.
How the vanilla one is a perfect coffee creamer. It causes a complete collapse of cognitive focus. The listener has to just stop thinking about the media critique, process all this consumer info, and then try to reboot that sense of outrage when you finally get back to the topic.
It's like you've spent 5 minutes building rhetorical tension, and then you slam on the brakes to read detailed cooking instructions. It completely deflates the structure.
Yeah, it's like watching the most dramatic scene in a movie, and suddenly a truck commercial comes on at twice the volume. So to preserve that urgency, the material really needs to structurally separate or at least minimize the ad detail during those critical peaks.
You want the outrage to flow right into the analysis of the headline.
You have to. But if the sponsor, needs a mid-roll ad, what's the best way to handle that without just losing everyone?
Right.
Well, the suggestion for improvement is really to prioritize the argument's integrity over the depth of the ad copy in that specific spot. You've got a couple of options. The cleanest one is just to move the whole ad.
Put it at the beginning or the end.
Right. Pre-analysis or during the closing. Or if it absolutely has to stay in the middle.
What then?
Something like, we're about to dissect the hypocrisy, but first a quick word. And that's it.
Don't get into the benefits or the vanilla flavor or the free frother they send you.
Save that detailed conversational part for a dedicated sponsor segment where the listener's actually prepared for it. Where it is right now, that level of detail is a pacing catastrophe.
That perfect. Respecting the flow of the argument. Okay, so let's move on to the actual substance of the defense of Adam.
Okay.
The piece does a great job personalizing. It brings in these details, his ex-wife caring for him, his final message about faith, the host being so proud he followed them on Twitter. He's framed as one of the good ones.
And those personal details, they build a really powerful sense of pathos. That emotional connection is very effective for rallying the existing fan base. But I wonder if by focusing so heavily on those personal connections, we're maybe missing a bigger opportunity to really bolster the argument against the institutional media.
So you're saying the defense is too focused on him being a good person, when the media attack is really about his public standing, his impact?
Exactly. The media's judgment comes from his public commentary, right? And the public fallout from it. The weakness here is that the material spends so much time on this subjective evidence.
Like the pride in being followed on Twitter?
Or the tribute from Trump? Or the very intimate nature of his final message? Look, those points are moving, for sure. But they don't actually rebut the institutional, professional claim that he was disgraced. The media is attacking his professional legacy.
That's a really sharp distinction. If the media is trying to erase his professional stature, the response needs to quantify that stature objectively. It can't just be about defending his character.
Precisely. The material says he was the modern Mark Twain and that Dilbert was on everyone's cube. But right now, those are just claims. To fight an institutional narrative, you need institutional proof of his former size.
You need metrics.
You need metrics, or at least widely acknowledged facts about the comic's global reach, its impact on corporate satire, something solid.
So the core suggestion for improvement here is to lead with the objective, verifiable evidence of his cultural prestige before the controversy. You have to establish the scale of the target the media is trying to tear down.
Yes, you have to establish the cultural, the return on investment of his work. Instead of jumping to the personal Twitter follow, you open with undeniable facts that prove his importance. You use logos, logic, statistics to support the pathos, the feeling.
Okay, give me a concrete example of how you transition into that.
Well, instead of saying, he only followed 2,300 people and we were one of them, which feels a little small, you create a hierarchy of importance. You start with the scope of the phenomenon.
Okay.
Something like, for 30 years, Dilbert was syndicated in X thousand newspapers worldwide, reaching Y million readers in Z languages. This wasn't just a comic. It was the single most globally recognized commentary on the modern workplace.
And then you can bring in the personal pride of the Twitter follow.
Exactly. That sequence establishes his immense, objective cultural weight first. And that makes the media's attempt to just dismiss him as disgraced look not just petty, but kind of objectively irrational.
That's a subtle change, but it's a powerful one. It shifts the whole argument from defending the man to defending the importance of the cultural institution he built.
Which makes the media's actions look much more politically motivated.
Which is the whole point of the critique in the first place, isn't it?
It is. It's to make the media's malice look structural, not personal.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move to the most rhetorically powerful part of this transcript, the comparative examples.
The shock comparisons.
Yeah, contrasting the disgraced headline for Adams for his speech with, O.J. Simpson being described as just dead at 76 from cancer.
Or the terrorist Qasem Soleimani being called a master of Iran's intrigue. I mean, it's potent stuff.
It is. They're powerful, high-contrast comparisons.
They are, and they do a great job of exposing this radical failure in moral weighting from mainstream journalism. But I'm going to push back a little on the execution.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Could the use of these extremely potent, high-contrast comparisons actually risk overwhelming or, alienating listeners who don't immediately get the specific rhetorical goal? Does it weaken the focus on media bias?
Wait, I'm not sure I follow. Isn't the shock value the entire engine of the comparison? I mean, if a listener isn't shocked by that difference, they probably aren't the target audience anyway. Why would you want to soften that?
See, it's not about softening the blow. It's about aiming the blow effectively. The point is that the material employs this powerful moral asymmetry, which is great, but it needs a clearer rhetorical frame to really maximize its effect without letting all that emotional energy just escape.
Okay.
The weakness, as it stands, is that the material jumps straight from presenting the comparisons, political speech versus little alleged crimes, to immediately declaring the critics are mentally ill.
Which is an understandable emotional reaction.
It's an understandable reaction, but it risks overshadowing the very logical conclusion that the comparison is meant to create. The shock is so intense that the audience might just be left with an emotional outburst rather than a real structural critique of moral failure.
So the shock value overwhelms the logic it's supposed to be supporting. We need a way to, harvest that outrage and direct it properly.
Precisely. So the suggestion here is that the argument has to explicitly state what the critique is. It's about the institutional failure to distinguish between controversial speech and actual malice or violence.
You're reframing it from just a shock tactic into a principled critique of moral weighting.
Exactly. You want the audience to walk away thinking about journalistic ethics and moral equivalent, not just the satisfaction of calling an opponent mentally ill.
Right. We need a rhetorical bridge that makes the comparison feel like a necessary indictment, not just a verbal sledgehammer.
Right. So, to offer a concrete example, before generalizing the critique to liberalism is a mental disorder, the material should ground the moral asymmetry. Maybe with a clarifying statement or a question.
Like what?
Something like, by using such radically different language, sanitizing clear criminality, while applying the ultimate shame label to political speech, the media demonstrates a radical moral flattening. They're equating controversial speech with literal crimes against humanity. Now, is this ethical judgment, or is it purely ideological warfare?
See, that transition elevates the entire argument. It's no longer just a partisan reaction. It's a genuine structural critique of the press's moral authority.
It sharpens the laser beam.
I can see how these 3 points already would strengthen this immeasurably. Let's summarize the steps for the listener.
Okay, so to recap this whole critique, we see 3 major opportunities for improvement in what is a very powerful piece. First, you absolutely have to address the pacing and structure.
Right. Minimize that add integration detail to maintain the momentum of the media critique right when the emotional tension is at its highest. That flow is just essential.
It is. Second, strengthen the defense of Adams's legacy by emphasizing his objective significance.
Lead with the data, the numbers about Dilbert's massive cultural reach. Use logos before you get to the pathos.
Exactly. That counteracts the media's attempt to delegitimize him. And third, you have to maximize the impact of those excellent rhetorical comparisons.
Frame them explicitly as a critique of the media's skewed moral priority. Make sure the shock value serves a clear, logical purpose and doesn't just feel like an emotional outburst.
If you implement these steps, fixing the structure, adding the objective data, building out the rhetorical framing, you're going to create a far more robust and compelling argument.
That's fantastic. Actionable feedback. We invite the listener to refine this material based on these points and submit it back to us for another critique. Until next time.